Well, hello and welcome in to Pack a Day Podcast Live. I am your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. You can also follow my guest on Twitter. You can follow him at Peter_Bukowski, of course, is the co-founder of The Leap. And I guess he kind of does Locked On Packers podcast as well. So check him out there every once in a while. He's got to keep the lights on too. So Peter, I know we had the opportunity to do a little bit of a home and home, had the opportunity to talk on Locked On Packers with you yesterday, which was phenomenal. I'm so thankful for you joining me today here on Pack a Day Live. How the heck are you doing?
I'm good. Unfortunately, I have like a lot of lights right now, so like it would really benefit me if you could help keep me on, because I got studio lights, I've got desk lights. Like we've got to keep a lot of lights on around here.
Yes, you do. So again, make sure to follow Locked On Podcast. Peter does a phenomenal job, and I'm ready to pick your brain today because we've got a lot of things to discuss. There are no lack of topics. I was actually talking to Aaron Nagler today, and I think it's like funny how the special teams basically imploded again in the same way that they did against the 49ers in the divisional round. And it's like a footnote of crap that had even a discussion point. But I want to start by asking you, the floor is yours. You can vent and go in any direction that you want. What is your biggest point of umbrage with the Packers right now?
Oh my goodness. How much time do you have? I guess we're going to go long on this.
As much time as you have.
I was just going to say we're going long on this, aren't we? So, man, there's a lot. I guess I don't get it. I don't get it because they're screwing things up that they didn't screw up last year. And then they're also screwing things up that they did screw up last year. And it's just sort of like, well, so then what is happening? What is going on? What went on over the offseason? What went on at training camp? I made the joke on Twitter that like, it seems like at practice when the media is not around, they go inside and are like watching Homeward Bound on the Wheelin' TV. Like there's a substitute teacher in the classroom. Like, I don't understand. And then what's, I think maybe even more frustrating is you see them, like the defense in the first half, just play great, just play terrific football. And the field goal that they allow is because Aaron Rodgers and AJ Dillon can't complete a basic handoff. And that is the 3 points. Otherwise, they had totally locked down this Jets offense. And then in the second half, they just like forget how to play football. And that's the part that's so frustrating, is they can look so good for stretches and then just forget how to play. And it's guys that you don't expect doing those things. It's Elton Jenkins, who we thought just like, yeah, I don't care coming off the ACL, plug and play right tackle. He's been bad. Like, let's call it what it is. He's been bad. And, John Runyon Jr. having his worst pass protection game in the worst possible situation when Royce Newman is also getting dog walked by Quinnen Williams up and down the field and Sheldon Rankins, and Elton Jenkins is not playing well. It's like, okay, cool. David Bakhtiari had the highest offensive tackle grade by Pro Football Focus this week. And like, it doesn't matter at all because the rest of the line could not block anybody. So it's just, it's everything. It's like, what did Adam Schefter say? An accumulation of information. Like, that's what it is so far this season. It's an accumulation of mistakes that have led them to this moment. And it's really hard to just say, okay, it's this one thing. If they fix this one thing, everything's fine. No, they've got to fix like 5 things.
One of my favorite pieces of writing ever is there was a Weezer review on pitchfork.com. And it's so good because I forget which awful album, like more recent album of theirs it was, but it was a terrible Weezer album. And the whole purpose of the review was to basically say, this album is so awful that now I have to go back and question all of their other, what I thought were great albums, because there's no way that the people who wrote this album could have ever at any point in time wrote anything good in the past. So now I have to go back and question everything in the past. It's a phenomenal article, but like, it's not quite to that point yet, but like the brand of football that Green Bay has been playing, like makes me call up things that have happened in the past over the last 3 years with Matt LaFleur and be like, almost like re-question things of like, were we just kind of tricked at times? Were there certain players like Aaron Rodgers playing at MVP level and Devontae Adams on God mode that just kind of covered a lot of mistakes? And I don't think it's just that. As you mentioned, there are things right now that we saw be good that are just not good right now. And that's really tough to explain away. But like a part of me is like now going back and being like, man, like what is going on? This brand of football looks nothing like the 13 win season we saw over the last.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Yeah, please do.
You sort of you flipped it on me on my show, so I'm going to flip it on you on yours.
Yes, please do.
What is their brand of football?
Is that the question for me? Like,
yeah.
So I actually
do they have one?
Yeah. Yes. No, I opened the podcast the other day with like, I don't know what their identity is. I legitimately don't know what they're trying to accomplish offensively, defensively. It seemed like defensively, they wanted the identity of playing off coverage, making sure they're not getting beat deep. And we're, in their 6th game of the season, they basically had to scrap everything of what they thought their identity was going to be because they realized that the players and system didn't marry each other very well. So in week 5, we had a crisis of identity on defense already, to the point where they basically had to change where players were playing, get linebackers off the field, but Amos in the box, Rudy Ford at safety, Jair in the slot, play more press man, and basically scrap their identity from the first 5 games of the season and really what they wanted to accomplish.
Which kudos to them for adjusting. Like that, like, I think that's a good thing, by the way.
Very much so. But like they had to scrap their identity defensively. Offensively, there's nothing that you could point to through 6 weeks in the season to say like, this is who we are. And I get that like that Matt LaFleur wants to attack whatever the defense is giving them. And we heard Adam Stenavich say something very similar in his press conference last week of basically like, listen, if they're going to give us single press man or, one-on-one man-to-man coverage on the outside press man, and they're going to give us those opportunities to hit shots on the field, we need to execute and hit shots on the field, which sounds great, but you can't. So like, then you have to change your identity. And I don't think they have a great idea of what they want to do offensively right now.
Yeah. What's the counter? Like this was, I thought, one of the really great writers over at Acme Packing Company, Rich, did a really good thread about how Robert Saleh had just scouted all of the play action looks. Like CJ Mosley was underneath every play action in breaker that they had, every glance route, every dig route. He was just underneath it because he knows that when this team wants to go play action, they want to hit that backside dig or that glance or whatever it is that they're running, whether it's strike or drift or whatever they're calling. And it's like, okay, so then where do you go? And they didn't have a lot of answers for that. And so they need to get to those answers. And what are they in the drop back game? What do they call besides, like the same 2 shot plays over and over? I really liked the 4th and 1 play, the motion into the slot fade. That's a really cool concept. And that's a great way to get Romeo Doubs free. I hate that call on 4th and 2. Hate that call. Like what is that? And so it's like they have these cool plays, but they're situationally not working. They have concepts that seem to really work in the run game. All these new pin pull runs that they're doing are really cool. What did they call 2 against the Jets? Like that was the place. And I think you even mentioned it, whether it was in a video or in a tweet. It was something that I had talked to Dusty about coming in, our pal Dusty Evely. Like, if you want to beat the Jets, you can outflank them. You can get to the edge. And then they tried to run inside all game against Quinnen Williams and Sheldon Rankins, and they're just getting blown up. And it's just like, what is happening? The couple times they ran to the outside, it worked. And one got called back because Elton Jenkins held, and it was like, okay, well, so that's going to happen. That's okay. But it just like, what do they want to be? And I don't know. And I do think, even though Matt LaFleur was joking a little bit when he said, I don't know what that means about simplifying the offense, I think that exchange perfectly encapsulates the issues that they're having right now, in that I think Matt LaFleur wants the offense to be one thing. I think Aaron Rodgers wants the offense to be something, I don't want to say something else, but something different, because I don't think it's something else. Like it's just something that is a little different, and they need to find whatever balance they need to find this year. Each of the last 2 seasons, they found a balance of Aaron Rodgers being Aaron Rodgers and Matt LaFleur being Matt LaFleur. They haven't found that balance this year. And Andy, I also think it's easy to forget. And I actually think your grades do a good job of encapsulating this.
Thank you.
Last year, through 8 games, this offense was not very good. And they couldn't hit shots downfield. And then they started hitting them. Like Jake Morley at Packer Report was tracking this. Like Rodgers was the worst deep ball thrower in the league among regular starters last year for like 6 straight weeks. And he hasn't found that touch yet this year. If they can do that, that opens up so much for this offense, but they can't yet. So what are they going to hang their hat on in the interim? Last year it was Devontae Adams.
You lose Peter? Oh, there we go.
Last year was Devontae Adams, and it was, like get a little lucky with some turnovers, like against Arizona with no receivers. They got a little lucky with some turnovers at the end, Russell Douglas, etc. But I don't know what they're going to hang their hat on here while they're figuring this all out. And without Christian Watson, Sammy Watkins, we'll see when he comes back. Like, I don't know where the answers are other than fix the offensive line and see what that can do.
There's so much that you said that I want to hit on. I do think for the last part, you mentioned how, some of those shot plays were not hitting a year ago, and then they started to hit, and that certainly changed how the offense was playing. I do think, and you kind of mentioned this at the end of yesterday's show and kind of our hint of optimism at the end. I do think there's a world where, we always talk when things are going really well, and you actually usually do a great job of this, of like how things will always regress back to the mean. I do think there's a world where it's the exact opposite in this situation, where like all of a sudden your offensive line, linemen remember how to block, and Aaron Rodgers remembers how to beautifully throw a deep pass. And you start hitting some of those shot plays, and like they have not got turnovers at all. And we know how those can come in bunches. And like all of a sudden you win the turnover battle and you hit a couple shot plays that you haven't been hitting, and your offensive line starts blocking a little bit better up front. And like you, all of a sudden those 3 things happen, and you're talking about a much different team and a much different record in a very short period of time. Now that's easier said than done. I don't think that happens overnight. But I do think there's a world where some of those things start clicking a little bit better, and we start seeing a totally different brand of football. I want to go back to your point, though, of how there was a very obvious opportunity to like sort of outflank them. Matt LaFleur mentioned in his press conference that they thought there was a really strong opportunity to attack the middle of the field out of shotgun formation.
Didn't do that either.
No, they didn't do that either. But I've for 2 weeks now against the Giants, it was very clearly evident that all they did against the Bears was run the football and go play action and bootleg over and over, to an extent that I have never seen a team run before. And Mike Wall talked about it. I talked about it. I'm sure you talked about it. Like everyone talked about, this is what they do. And I was actually, in a weird way, like complimented the Bears, or thanked the Bears for like, hey, thanks for kind of figuring it out in the second half, where you're kind of bringing a guy off the backside and just making sure that there's somebody to account for Danny Dimes every time, so that, you've kind of got your bases covered and they can't keep doing that. The Bears sort of put the blueprint together in the second half. The Packers didn't follow it at all. And TJ Slayton says after the game, we were really surprised by how much play action and bootleg they did in that game. And it's like, what? How are you not prepared, or how is the message, if they were prepared, why is that message not getting across to the players? Because that is extremely concerning. And then this week, as Mike Wall mentioned it, you mentioned it, I mentioned it, there's a lot of opportunity to outflank them, get some of those toss plays to the outside, and they barely attempted it whatsoever. And then the other thing is, as mentioned, Matt LaFleur said they wanted to attack the middle of the field against the Jets. They didn't even try. Like Aaron Rodgers didn't even look in that direction. So those are all concerning things. And then lastly, from a game planning scheme standpoint, is you can, like, one of the easy, very, very easy things to tell on tape for the Jets as well is they are a gap, penetrating front. They want to shoot those gaps over and over, use the speed and athleticism of Rankins and Quinnen Williams. And you would have thought that they had never expected that coming at all, the way that those guys were shooting through basically everything. They had wide splits. They were basically inviting them to come up the field. Like, just the game planning and the attention to detail over the past 2 weeks is maybe the thing that has me most concerned, because that is stuff that just can't go unnoticed.
What's really particularly frustrating about the bootleg thing, aside from the like being surprised that that's what they're going to do because it's all they do, is you go back a couple years, the Packers couldn't run it. The Vikings couldn't run it. Teams stopped running those naked actions because everyone was crashing that backside end at the QB.
Yep.
And the first team, in fact, someone over at Zone Coverage wrote about this, who covers the Vikings, that it was the Packers with Mike Patton who put the blueprint together with Preston Smith. And it was Preston Smith coming into the face of the quarterback, and the Vikings had to stop running it because everyone started doing that against the Vikings. And then Everyone started doing it against the Packers, and the Packers like scrapped the play. They didn't even run it because everyone had the blueprint for it. And then the Packers were just like, really? Wait, how do we do this again? And it's just like, how do you, like, that is the part that is so frustrating that I mentioned at the top. Like, this is stuff they were doing last year. Preston Smith was doing this on bootlegs last year. And yet, in a game where you have an offense that all they do is run these play actions and these bootlegs, they didn't have someone there. And it's just like, I don't understand how that can be true. It's the same players. It's the same coaches. You were doing it last year. Why are you not doing it this year? There's no good explanation for that. I can't account for it. And that's why this is so bizarre. Now, what I was sort of hanging my hat on coming into this season was I went back and I looked at all the games against playoff quarterbacks last year. And if you look at them, they beat up Patrick Mahomes, one of the Patrick Mahomes' worst games.
Yep.
Russell Wilson. It turns out Russell Wilson might be cooked, but they shut out Russell Wilson. Joe Burrow, they played really well against, and especially if you take away the one fluky second reaction heave where Darnell Savage misplays the ball to Jamar Chase, they played pretty well against Joe Burrow. They played really well against Kyler Murray, and they played really well against Jimmy G, including in the actual playoff game. That's the list of playoff quarterbacks that they played last year. Really, really good games. It was the games against the Browns where they couldn't, Nick Chubb had 500 yards. And it was the game against Tyler Huntley where they allowed the Ravens to come back from 17 down. It was these stupid games. Well, this year they're losing the stupid games. And last year they won some of them. And so on, you mentioned the regression thing. Some of this is just sort of like, it's not even close game regression, although the Giants game was technically one of those one score games. This Jets game wasn't. And it's doing stuff that you just don't understand. Like fumbling exchanges. This is the second fumbled exchange in 6 weeks. Did they have one of those last year? Like it's stuff that you just don't expect. Now the special teams, bedwettings, we kind of expect, like at this point. Yes, they were supposed to have fixed it. They didn't. But think about it. 10 points, just like the playoff game.
Yep.
Special teams cost them. And another 3, the turnover cost them. In a 17-point game, simple, basic turnover mistakes cost you 13 points. Think of what a different game it is if you have those 13 points back. Now, you still are fighting and scraping and clawing to beat the Jets, but you at least make it a fight. It's at least a one-score game at the end, and you're not putting Jordan Love out there to just like mop up. Yeah. It's Aaron Rodgers with a chance to go win the game potentially. So, again, that's the optimist case, but how can we have any faith that the special team is going to be fixed? Like they had a play where Amari Rodgers gets popped, loses the ball, it bounces right to Josiah DeGuara. No harm, no foul, except Amari Rodgers lost the ball for the millionth time in his NFL career, and it's been 20 games. Like it's maddening that this is where we are.
Yeah, the course corrections just haven't been good enough. I think that's very clear. It felt like last year's, and this is all reactionary note here too. It's not, you're not fixing it before the problem happens. You're reacting to everything, but it seemed like the divisional round loss was the special teams come to Jesus moment. It felt like the Giants game 2 weeks ago is the defense has come to Jesus moment. And it feels like the offense this week is hopefully their come to Jesus moment of like figuring something out. I do think they'll likely, maybe, hopefully change the offensive line a little bit around, and whether it's simplifying things or whatever, who knows. I know you mentioned the simplification thing earlier. I do want to pick your brain on that, and you kind of touched on it, but so Rodgers wants simplification. Matt LaFleur basically says, I'm not exactly sure what that means. You're going to have to ask Aaron and those sort of things. There was the clip from an interview earlier this summer of Rodgers talking about how things get a little overcomplicated at times. Is there anything here? What do you make of it? And what's your biggest takeaway? Or is this much ado about nothing?
Very clearly, Aaron Rodgers is having to be convinced to play the way that he's playing and has played. And if you look at the way that the team played in 2019, it was very different than the way that they played in 2020. 2020, much more under center, much more heavy play action, much more motion, pre-snap motion, jet motion, all that stuff. And then in 2020, it sort of came back a little bit. right? Resembled a little bit more of what we saw in 19. Now, part of that is they didn't have a jet guy they trusted because they didn't think Amari could be out there. And they didn't have anyone else that they trusted to do that. They didn't want to waste Randall Cobb's legs doing that because that's a lot of running, right?
In 2021, you mean, right?
2021, yes. And so it resembled a lot more of the 2019 in style, though in substance, it was much better, at least in the second half. How am I supposed to interpret that change after you win the MVP? And I know he won the MVP again, in part because it was a down year for Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson and other guys who might have won the MVP.
Correct.
How am I supposed to interpret that change as anything other than a reaction to what happened last spring and summer? How can you come to any other conclusion than Rodgers throws a hissy fit and comes back and the offense looks more like the way that he wants the offense to look? And we come into this season, especially without Christian Watson, jet motion down, hard play action down, everything out of. Has Aaron Rodgers been under center and thrown a pass like more than 10 times this season? Seems like no. Way more shotgun play action. And so Aaron Rodgers is having to be convinced to play more the way that Matt LaFleur wants to play. And so I do think there is this dissonance in approach that these two people have, but they've been able to make it work to this point. I don't know, and I'm interested to see how much longer that's the case when the offense struggles the way that it is. Because Aaron Rodgers' response is, we need to lean more into the way that I want to play. But it seems like Matt LaFleur's response is, and I don't know about you, but my response would be that they need to lean more into the way that Matt LaFleur wants to play. Because press the easy button. That's what Nate Tice calls it. I love that idea, pressing the easy button. There's so much of this Shanahan tree, McVay tree, LaFleur tree offense that is just pressing the easy button. Define read, define throws, RPO teams to death. Aaron Rodgers could be the best RPO thrower in the history of football if he wanted to be. I was talking about this with Dusty on one of his live streams. Like, he has the brain and the quick release to be the most deadly RPO quarterback we've ever seen. But he thinks that's beneath him. And I kind of get it, because he's like, well, you're turning me into Jared Goff. But like, that team went to the Super Bowl. Jimmy Garoppolo went to the Super Bowl playing that way. Like, you can be really good playing that way. It doesn't all have to be on your shoulders. Let them press the easy button. And I hope that that's what ends up happening. I also, let me put my body language doctor hat on for a second. It occurs to me that there's a reason Matt LaFleur has been a little churlish at the microphone over the last 2 weeks. And part of that, I'm sure, is just frustration that the offense is not going the way that he wants, but it's also not going the way that he wants, Andy. Like, and so I think part of this is there is this internal struggle. Now, struggle might be overstating it, right? But just like this internal dialogue, and I'm sure everyone is frustrated. Like, I'm sure Romeo Doubs is frustrated. Alan Lazard is frustrated. David Bakhtiari, Elton Jenkins, Josh Myers, Aaron Jones. I know Aaron Jones is frustrated because he's not getting the ball. And so, like, everyone is pissed off. And you know what? I think it's really good for this team to be pissed off. Frankly, I'd like to see them a little more pissed off.
Yeah.
I talked to Lily Zhao about this today for our show tomorrow. I'm kind of, and maybe I'm just like Ned Yosted out of like being annoyed at anyone who is just like, oh, we're fine. Like, Jeff Suppan gives up 5 runs. You're like, I think Sup pitched pretty well today. It's like, no, can we not do this? Can you be a little pissed off? Like, I know fans always want to see guys pissed off, but like, how can you watch Bills Chiefs and think the Packers are capable of playing in a game with that sort of intensity? They just haven't played with that sort of intensity as a team on both sides of the ball since when?
Probably what? I mean, there parts of the 2019 Zadarius Smith defense, or 20, was that 2020? I keep getting my years mixed up, but like when Z was really good and that defense was actually showing some flashes, there was a little bit of that.
Like, the defense played like that in the playoff game.
Yes,
I think the last time we saw them play a full game with that sort of offensive and defensive intensity, it was the Rams game at home, because they were fired up for that game. I was at that game in the stands. I haven't been in the stands as a fan in a long time, and the crowd was hot for that game. It was Thanksgiving weekend. That was like, they need that intensity, and I don't know where that is right now. I don't know where they find it. they need the leaders in that locker room to steady the ship a little bit. And until they do, it's going to look disjointed.
There is a piece of me, and this is probably being a little bit over optimistic, but I do think that great teams have to go through adversity. And I do think the best teams are the ones that get punched in the face and then are ultra motivated to figure out A, to make sure that they don't get punched in the face again, and then B, how to punch back and punch harder moving forward. And it just felt like the last 3 seasons they've had this good football team, but the first time they really got punched in the face to an extent that it felt like it mattered was in the playoffs, and then it's over. And then you just go on to the off season and it's a new team and you start fresh, and you don't really have that moment with your team to grow from the mistakes that you made. This is the first time Matt LaFleur's lost back-to-back regular season games, as everyone's pointed out this week. I do think there is something to that where if you can learn from that and you can grow from that and you can come together as a team from that, you can take a real step in a positive direction. And it could actually help this team a lot through the remainder of the season. Of course, it very much could go the exact opposite way, and division could, sow itself within different cliques in the locker room and all those sort of things. And, but losing is either, and pressure is either going to mold you or it's going to define you. And I think we're about to find out on this 3-game road trip off of 2 really tough losses to 2 New York teams, exactly what type of mental and other fortitude that the Packers have moving forward.
Yeah, they say adversity doesn't build character, it reveals it. And I think we're going to find out the character of this football team in a hurry. I mean, when Jair Alexander is saying, I'll be worried after the Jets game if we play like crap against the Jets, and the defense, by and large didn't, really just 2 drives in the second half. But and then he says, I'm actually not a worrier after that. And it's just sort of like, okay, well, so then at what point are you going to be a little pissed off that this is what's happening? But even Rashawn Gary, who I thought was the sort of most energetic about all of this, like the word that he used about 400 times in the interviews that he did at his locker was hungry. We're hungry. Okay. I just I kind of want you to be pissed off. That, yep. And I think I don't think there's a right answer. I don't think I'm right and they're wrong for feeling that way. I think everyone has to process these things and deal with them the way that they have to deal with them. I think this is just an aesthetic thing for me. Like if you're the kind of athlete that can just say this is let's just right the ship, great. But I think fans by and large want to see the passion, they want to see the fire. And that's the thing that makes me want to see them pissed off is I want to see the fire. And that's what I don't see is guys flying around. Like it was clear from the first 3 snaps of the game, which team came to play and which team came to win. And the team that came to win was not the Green Bay Packers. The Jets were flying around on that first possession from the jump, and the Packers looked annoyed that they had to play at noon. Like it was so striking. And I was just like, uh-oh, they're jet lagged. And then when it was like 3-3, I was like, okay, they'll figure this out. It'll be fine in the second half and they'll win and they'll cover and all this stuff. And then it just kept going away from them. And I think Andy, we have to sort of recalibrate with this team. And I said that in 2019, like we just sort of have to recalibrate what success is, like winning all those ugly games. You're just like, all right, winning is the only thing that matters. Well, now they're not winning and it's ugly. Yep. And maybe the bill is just coming due from all those close games in 2019 and 2020 and 2021 that they won. And this is like a true regression of all that stuff. But at the same time, they have 2 losses by double digits. Like those were not close games. But let me ask you about this because I was watching the tape earlier just to watch Romeo Doubs. I just wanted to have some happiness in my life. And so I just wanted to watch Romeo Doubs, and man, is he fun to watch. He's so smooth. He's so dynamic. And it struck me even on plays where he's not getting the ball, when it's like there was the one play to Alan Lazard where just like pressure is scuttling some of these plays at the worst possible time. Like Alan Lazard on a crossing route. I think the concept was mesh. Doesn't matter. The Jets let him loose, and Aaron Rodgers is about to throw it, and then all of a sudden pressure comes and he's sacked, like just in a flash. There was another play where I don't remember if it was off play action. Yeah, it was. No, it wasn't. It wasn't. And they had a whole shot to Doubs in cover 2. And Elton Jenkins just get worked off the snap. And if it's just like lose in 2.6 seconds instead of 2 seconds, Rodgers has time to make the throw and it's a potentially big play. Like they've just been so unlucky. I'll never get over the Vikings game. They had 2 or 3 big plays that pressure just because of like weirdness totally screwed it up. Like when 2 guys blocked each other and Zadarius Smith blew up that whole play. Like they had a big play to Sammy Watkins in the middle of the field. If that's just not a total disaster from the blocking standpoint. And so that's the part of me going just clean some of this stuff up. And there's so many opportunities for them to hit on some of this stuff that you're like, okay, they say that they're close. Are they really? The answer is yes, but they have to get some of this stuff fixed. But they really have been so unlucky as a cop-out, I think. But they have been unlucky in that some of the pressure, and I think this is why the pressure numbers seem worse than they are. They're actually, Rodgers is only facing pressure marginally more this year than last year. It's 29% versus 26.5% last year in terms of dropbacks. But the pressure is more catastrophic this year because, number one, it's usually on 3rd down. And number 2, it always seems to be on plays where they have something good set up and they can't get to it. And you're just like, oh, if they could have only gotten to that thing, it's a big play and the whole game changes.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. And I think when I watched Romeo Doubs this year, and again, I'm not saying that they're going to be the same player or anything like that, but it reminded me a lot of, I think it was Devontae Adams' 3rd season, where he was just starting to really come into his own. And that was when, Nelson was obviously Rodgers' favorite target, and he would constantly look at Nelson as his first read in his progression. And I don't necessarily think that it's the same apples to apples, but I remember watching it that season and being like, Adams is getting open on like almost every play. And like Nelson was obviously like winding down and not getting the same separation, but the first look was always to Nelson. And then we would get to Adams. And to your unlucky point, I swear on everything, it was like every time he looked to Adams was like the one play he did not get open on the play. Right. Like I swear on everything. And it was the most frustrating thing in the world watching the All-22 that year, because it was like Adams open, doesn't get a glance. And then finally we're like, all right, we're going to go to Adams this play. And just by like stupid happenstance, it's the play that he's not open. And like, that's a little bit what I get out of watching the Romeo Doubs experience this year of like, it's like every time that he's breaking wide open due to a smooth, ridiculous, beautiful, gorgeous route, it's like either the offensive line breaks down or Rodgers is looking the other way, or the ball just is, and the one time he dropped it and like, it just is like, hasn't connected yet. The fact that this guy isn't above 10 yards per reception yet with how he is beating guys on the outside is just like beyond stupid, because you see it over and over on tape of him getting open down the field. And it's just like, it's bound to click eventually, because I just don't know how it couldn't. It happens way too often.
There was one play, and this play just sort of annoyed me because they had Doubs on, I can't remember if it was a corner. I think it was a corner out, and he beats the corner. The safety comes over to help, and because the safety is coming horizontally and Doubs is already in 6th gear.
Yep.
He just flies right by the safety. And if the ball is out front, it's a touchdown. Now, it's a 50-yard throw from where Aaron Rodgers is, because it's a deep route, and it was a 7-step concept. And Rodgers misses him by 15 yards. I mean,
that's
woefully underthrown.
Short, right?
The wind was swirling, and Rodgers said the Aaron Jones throw was affected by the wind, and so like some of this is just sort of wonkiness. But it's like, man, he was clean down the field. There was another play, on the Aaron Jones play that I just mentioned. Romeo Doubs runs right by the corner on that side of the field. Like, just absolutely works him to the top. And DJ Reed is playing his butt off this year. He's a really good player. And Doubs just ran right by him a couple times. And again, that's another one. If Rodgers is looking, now safety shaded to that side, right? So the right read is to Jones.
Yep.
But Romeo Doubs is open. And it's so funny that you brought up that season, the 16 season, was it?
I think it's right around there, yeah.
Because 17 was mostly Brett Hundley.
Yep, you're right. It's
so
16.
I always go back, and Jason Hirschhorn and I have talked about this, my co-founder at The Leap. In fact, we wrote a little blurb about it earlier in the season, that after the 14 season, that first game, they had Davante Adams against Richard Sherman as the sacrificial lamb. They never lined up Jordy Nelson to the right to Richard Sherman's side. And that was intentional. Obviously, they wanted Nelson against, I forget who in 14, who the other corner was at that time. They had a couple in that Legion of Boom run.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter. There were a couple times when Davante beat Richard Sherman on like inbreakers, on slants and skinny posts. And Jason and I were just sort of like, we were watching the All 22, texting each other like, are you watching this? Like, he's beating Richard Sherman. And not getting looks, obviously, because it's a rookie against Richard Sherman. But there were times when he's open and it's like, wait a second, what is this? Like, could this guy be really good? Is this like, could this really be something? And I obviously, I don't think either of us are saying, and I hate that we have to add these caveats, neither of us are saying we expect Romeo Doubs to become the best receiver in football, which is what Davante Adams is. But I think it is worth saying that he is open more often than he's getting the ball. And I would just like to see them feature him a little bit more. Now, that's weird to say for a guy leading the team in targets, and second on the team in receptions behind Tunyon. And a lot of those Tunyon passes are outlet passes that are just sort of like, okay, 1-2, bang, here's Bobby underneath. And Rodgers is lucky if he's getting to 2 before pressure's in his face.
Yep.
But the Dobbs stuff is so tantalizing. And like the fact that they really have only thrown to him once deep, he caught it and then couldn't finish it, is so heartbreaking, because that could have just been the like codification of everything. Like, okay, this is his coming out party. He's here. He is the guy now. And in a lot of ways, he still is. They ran the 11 personnel version of the 21 personnel concept that they run from Split Gun, where it's the RPO to one side and the swing screen to the other side. They ran it with Dobbs in the backfield just as a way to get him a touch.
Yep.
Like, that is, I think, proof that they see what you and I see on tape, that this guy just needs chances. He just needs opportunities. They called the 4th down play for him. Like, I think sooner rather than later, we're going to see games where he's got 10, 12 targets, because it's going to become obvious he's the best receiver on this team.
And with some of the injuries, I think they're just going to have to too. And
yeah, they're not going to have a choice.
It might be a happy accident in a way too, because it should be that way, because that's the way he's playing. But I think, like you said, it's just going to happen. He's too good for it not to happen. One more question, I'll get you out of here. The receivers is, of course, the big topic. We've touched on the offensive line quite a bit. Everyone wants to trade for a wide receiver. I know there was some rumblings out there on Twitter that the Packers are calling around for wide receivers. It's really tough to find a wide receiver that makes sense financially, that would fit the team, for a team that's actually would potentially be in sell mode. There's not many teams that would potentially be in sell mode right now, because of just like everyone's like either, basically everyone's in 3-3 or like a game above or below it. And yeah, I don't know. Is there a name? Like, I know the Kendrick Bourne, I know the Chase Claypool. Those are a couple names that have been thrown out there. Is there anything that makes sense or tantalizing to you out there? Or is this just going to have to be the receivers that they have the rest of the year?
So I do believe that they are actively trying to add. And I mentioned our pal Jason. He reported that in the spring, the Packers made serious overtures to get Corey Davis from the Jets, and the Jets were just like not interested. They were trying, and I had heard other bigger names the Packers made calls about, trying to get, some West Coast teams to give up some players that you've certainly heard of. And they weren't able to do it. So it's not like the Packers are just like chill with what's going on. Like, I don't think anyone should assume that they're just fine with it. But some of these names, like, okay, the Patriots might be willing to give you Nelson Aguilar. Like, okay, cool. Yeah. Like, it's the John Oliver, like, cool meme. Yeah, like, exactly. It's just like, okay, fine. I would just sign Will Fuller at that point. And I think like Will Fuller is their sort of like the ace in their back pocket, because they're just, and maybe not even ace. He's like an 8 of hearts in your back pocket. And Matt LaFleur loves him, and they tried to trade for him like 1.5 times. And came close. Was it in 20? Yep. And so, and I heard that was even closer than it was reported. That the Packers were really pushing for that Matt LaFleur spent the whole week in prep going like, this guy is the guy.
He got suspended, right?
I'm sorry?
Didn't he get suspended right after that?
Immediately suspended as soon as the trade deadline passed. Did not play another game. He was hurt and then got suspended. So sort of a blessing, and then was a free agent. So sort of a blessing in disguise that the Packers did not go that route. Like the Claypool thing is interesting to me. What about Brandon Cooks? I know that he said he wants to stay in Houston, but there is that familiarity there, and losing is only fun for very short times. Like, I know that he wants his family to be there, but if it's only for half a season and he has a chance to help a team really compete and contend in an offense that he knows, with a coach that he knows, like, I think that there could be a fit there, you know, in a week as we get closer to the trade deadline, in 10 days, whatever it is, because we're 2 weeks away from the trade deadline. That is a name that I do think actually moves the needle for the Packers. And then, you know, they don't seem that interested in moving him, but I would move heaven and earth to get DJ Moore, because he's under contract. The Panthers have no use for him, and he's expensive. And so the Packers can, and he's cheap this year. So he's sort of perfect for Green Bay, because he's very cheap this year, gets a little progressively more expensive, and most of the money the Panthers are going to have to eat on the trade. So he actually becomes reasonably priced in his future years. He might want a new contract in 2 years. Okay, then maybe you trade him in 2 years if Aaron Rodgers is retiring or whatever the case is. I think you want to find guys who either really move the needle as short-term rentals, like a Brandon Cooks, or someone who can be a centerpiece for you. Now, generally speaking, there aren't that many teams willing to give up those centerpieces. Carolina is the one team that just fired their coach. Their owner is annoyed at what's going on and might be willing to just say, yeah, give us a first-round pick, give us the A.J. Brown deal, and you can have DJ Moore. And if I'm the Packers, you right the wrong of not being in on the A.J. Brown deal, and you get DJ Moore. He's the perfect fit for this offense. Throw him those swing screens. Throw him slants, RPOs all day, and then he can get down the field. Like, he's just the absolute perfect fit in this offense. And so that would be someone that I would target. I don't like Kendrick Bourne. Fine, you know, like he's useful. I think he can do like sort of what you'd want Sammy Watkins to be in a perfect world. But I don't know if that's really changing your outlook as a team. There's so many other things that I'm more concerned about just getting fixed internally. That those kinds of things are not where I'm trying to, you know, find what's going on here. Is there a name that really intrigues you?
No, I mean, not that makes sense, right? Like DJ Moore is, if he becomes available, maybe, but a part of me
doesn't seem like he's available. So
no, it doesn't. I mean, a part of me is hesitant of like, do you really want to pump a bunch of future draft picks in this team right now? Like, if you get DJ Moore, like you better make sure that you're competing, like extremely competing in the playoffs if you're making that type of move. And then,
but Andy, aren't you the same guy who said that the Packers have never really truly opened a window for contention? Like, don't you want to see them try?
I do, if I think they can fix the offensive line issues and some of those things.
So you're just not as bullish on this team as you were 6 weeks ago.
That's very true. I think that's true. But like, I wouldn't hate it. I'll put it that way. It would give me pause to be like, hey, let's pump a bunch of more future picks into this team to try to make this work right now. But not opposed to it, but that would probably be the one. I'll ask you this, and then I want you to plug everything you're working on, including where we can follow you on Twitter. But if the Panthers called and said DJ Moore's on the table, what's the most you would give us? What would be your answer to the most you would give up for DJ Moore?
I think the AJ Brown deal was what, a 1 and a 4?
Yeah, 1 and a 4, like early 4, something like that.
I think that's workable, especially because you don't, unlike with the Eagles, have to redo the deal. He just signed that deal. So assuming he doesn't want to get a new contract, and assuming the Panthers would actually be willing to do that, yeah, 1 and a 4. And I think in the same way that like OBJ would most boost a team like the Packers and the Rams, I think DJ Moore would be the most valuable to Green Bay in a lot of the same ways that AJ Brown ends up being incredibly valuable to the Eagles, just because of all of their offense is based on RPOs and those play action glance routes, like that he is just such a killer on. I think DJ Moore is in that same sort of position where he could come in and he would be more valuable to Green Bay because of how he would elevate their offense in this championship window where, I don't know, the rest of the NFC kind of sucks. So, you know, like that would be the biggest reason for me to be like, go for it. Cause you're going to have teams like, you know, the Lions feeling like, oh, we're in this. And, you know, some of these, like the Falcons are going to feel like they're a playoff team.
Yep.
Because, and they might go like, hey, let's go try and do this because who knows? And the Giants probably are going to be a playoff team. Like at a certain point, it's just math. Like they're 5-1. They're going to make the playoffs. Just like the numbers say they're going to make the playoffs. Why wouldn't they add? Now, I would also call on Kadarius Toney. Apparently he's a knucklehead, but the Packers liked him in the draft. And I don't know. What is it? Is the offense going to be worse if he's out there? I don't know. Maybe, but if you can get him for nothing, I don't know, it'd be worth a call. It'd be something interesting to me, at least. He can return punts.
That is something. that is something that they could definitely use. I will go as far as to say whatever the deal would end up being, Peter, I would even throw in Amari Rodgers to sweeten the deal, just to put everything right over. I'm kidding. Peter, where can we follow you on Twitter? Tell us all about Locked On Packers. And
Peter_Bukowski is the Twitter handle. The Leap, wherever you get newsletters, which is at theleap.substack.com. So not wherever, just at that specific URL, you can get it. Put your email in there. Free on Mondays. It is pay the rest of the time, but we give you a great deal if you sign up for the year. And then obviously Locked On Packers, wherever you find podcasts, we're on YouTube. And that's 5 days a week during the season, 4-ish days a week in the off season, except for the 1 month of the year I get vacation. So thanks to everyone who is following along and hanging out. And so we all of us as Packers content creators appreciate everything that the fans bring for us, because they allow us, and I'll speak for Andy, that they allow us to have fun doing this. And so we wouldn't do this every day as Andy and I do if we didn't have a lot of fun doing it, if we didn't have a lot of respect for the fans and just like love being a part of this community and engaging with everybody. So thanks to everyone that supports both of these shows, because it means a lot to me, and I'm sure it means a lot to Andy.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better. I appreciate you saying that. And make sure to subscribe both to Locked On Packers and Pack a Day podcast on YouTube. Tom Grossi is trying to monopolize the entire YouTube scene. And, he's getting
selfish.
It's just classic Tom Grossi, like hundreds of millions of viewers at a given moment for anything
Unreal.
that he does. So, share some of the wealth, Grossi. Some of us have, mouths to feed as well. So make sure you subscribe to Locked On and Pack a Day, because
I lost the light. Come on, Tom. I need to keep the lights on.
We can't let Grossi get away with this. All right, Peter, thanks so much for joining me. Appreciate it. At Peter_Bukowski, at Andy Herman NFL, at Pack a Day Podcast. Until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.